Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, students, this is lecture number 14 on literary forms and movements, and the topic of today's discussion is feminism. Students, in today's lecture we are going to discuss history and theory of feminism. History, first wave of feminism, second wave of feminism, and then third wave of feminism, and after that we would discuss post-feminism. Students, the term feminism can be used to describe a political, cultural or economic movement aimed at establishing equal rights and legal protection for women. Feminism involves political and sociological theories and philosophies concerned with issues of gender difference, as well as movement that advocates gender equality for women and campaigns for women's rights and interests. Students, although the terms feminism and feminist did not gain widespread use until the 1970s, they were already being used in the public parlance much earlier. For instance, Catherine Hepburn speaks of the feminist movement in the 1942 film Woman of the Year. Students, according to Maggie Hum and Rebecca Walker, the history of feminism can be divided into three waves. The first feminist wave was in the 19th and early 20th century. The second wave was in the 1960s and 1970s, and the third extends from the 1990s to present. Students, feminist theory emerged from these feminist movements. It is manifest in a variety of disciplines such as feminist geography, feminist history, and feminist literary criticism. So students, feminism has altered predominant perspectives in a wide range of areas within Western society, ranging from culture to law. Feminist activists have campaigned for women's legal rights, right of contract, property rights, voting rights, for women's right to bodily integrity and autonomy, for abortion rights, and for reproductive rights, including access to contraceptions and quality prenatal care, for protection of women and girls from domestic violence, sexual harassment and rape, for workplace rights including maternity leave and equal pay, against misogyny and against other forms of gender-specific discrimination against women. Students, during much of its history, most feminist movements and theories had leaders who were predominantly middle-class white women from Western Europe and North America. However, at least since Sojourner Truth's 1851 speech to American feminist women of the other races have proposed alternative feminism. This trend accelerated in the 1960s with the civil rights movements in the United States and the collapse of European colonialism in Africa, the Caribbean coasts of Latin America and Southeast Asia. Since that time, women in former European colonies and the Third World have proposed post-colonial and Third World feminism. Some post-colonial feminists such as Mohanty are critical of women of Western feminism for being ethnocentric. Black feminists such as Angela Davis and Alice Walker shares this view. Student Simone de Beauvoir wrote that the first time you see a woman take up her pen in defense of her sex, and Christian de Pizan, who wrote Epistle to the God of Love. The first wave refers mainly to women's suffrage movements of the 19th and early 20th century, mainly concerned with women's right to vote. The second wave refers to the ideas and actions associated with the women's liberation movements beginning in the 1960s, which campaigned for legal and social rights for women. The third wave refers to a continuation of and a reaction to the perceived failures of second wave feminism beginning in the 1990s. Students' first wave feminism refers to an extended period of feminist activity during the 19th century and early 20th century in the United Kingdom and United States. Originally, it focused on the promotion of equal contact and property rights for women and the opposition to chattel marriage and ownership of married women and their children by their husband. However, by the end of the 19th century, activism focused primarily on gaining political power, particularly the right of women's suffrage. Yet, feminists such as Litreray and Margaret Sanger were still active in campaigning for women's sexual, reproductive and economic rights at this time. In 1854, Nightingale established female nurses as adjuncts to the military. In Britain, the suffragettes and possibly more effectively suffragists campaigned for the women's vote in 1918. The Representation of People Act 1918 was passed, granting the vote to women over the age of 30 who owned houses. In 1928, this was extended to all women over 21. In the United States, leaders of this movement included Maude, Lucy Stone, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Susan B. Anthony, who each campaigned for the abolition of slavery prior to the campaigning women's right to vote. All were strongly influenced by Quaker thought. American first wave feminism involved a wide range of women. Same as such, Frances Willard belonged to conservative Christian groups such as the Women's Christian Temperance Union. Others such as Matilda Cage, who more radical and expressed themselves within the national women's suffrage associations or individually. American first wave feminism is considered to have ended with the passage of the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution 1919, granting women the right to vote in all states. The term first wave was coined retrospectively after the term second wave feminism began to be used to describe a new feminist movement that focused as much on fighting social and cultural inequalities as political inequalities. Students, second wave of feminism refers to the period of activity in the early 1960s and lasting through the late 1980s. The scholars Imelda suggests that the second wave was continuation of the earlier phase of feminism involving the suffragettes in the UK and USA. Second wave feminism has continued to exist since that time and coexists with what it termed third wave feminism. The scholar Stella Friedman compares first and second wave feminism, saying that the first wave focused on rights such as suffrage, whereas the second wave was largely concerned with other issues of equality such as ending discrimination. The feminist activist and author Carol Hanisch coined the slogan, "The personal is political," which became synonyms with the second wave. Second wave feminists saw women's cultural and political inequalities as inextricably linked and encouraged women to understand aspects of their personal lives as deeply politicized and as reflecting sexist power structures. Students, the French author and philosopher Simone de Beauvoir wrote novels, monographs on philosophy, politics and social issues, essays, biographies and an autobiography for the wake of second wave of feminism. She is now best known for her metaphysical novels including She Came to Stay and The Man Dreams, and for her treatise The Second Sex, a detailed analysis of women's oppression and foundational tract of contemporary feminism. Written in 1949, students, its English translation was published in 1953. It sets out as a feminist existentialism which prescribes a moral revolution. As an existentialist, she accepted Jean-Paul Sartre's percept existence precedes essence, hence one is not born a woman but becomes one. Her analysis focuses on the social construction of woman as the other. This de Beauvoir identifies as fundamental to women's oppression. She argues women have historically been considered deviant and abnormal and contends that even Mary Wollstonecraft considered men to be the ideal toward which women should aspire. De Beauvoir argues that for feminism to move forward, this attitude must be set aside. Students, Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique criticized the idea that women could only find fulfillment through children and homemaking. According to Friedan's obituary in the New York Times, The Feminine Mystique ignited the contemporary women's movement in 1963 and as a result permanently transformed the social fabric of the United States and countries around the world, and is widely regarded as one of the most influential non-fiction books of the 20th century. Students, in the book, Friedan hypothesizes that women are victims of a false belief system that requires them to find identity and meaning in their lives through their husbands and children. Such a system causes women to completely lose their identity in that of their family. Friedan specifically locates this system among post-World War II middle-class suburban communities. At the same time, America's post-war economic boom had led to the development of new technologies that were supposed to make household work less dutiful, but what often had the result of making women's work less meaningful and valuable. Students, the phrase women's liberation was first used in the United States in 1964 and first appeared in print in 1966. By 1968, although the term Women's Liberation Front appeared in the magazine Ramparts, it was starting to refer to the whole women's movement. Students, third wave feminism began to the early 90s, arising as a response to perceived failures of the second wave and also as a response to the backlash against initiatives and movements created by the second wave. Third wave feminism seeks to challenge or avoid what it deems the second wave essentialist definitions of femininity, which according to them overemphasize the experiences of upper middle class white women. Students, a post-structuralist interpretation of gender and sexuality is centered to much of the third wave ideology. Third wave feminists often focus on micropolitics and challenge the second wave's paradigm as to what is or is not good for females. The third wave has its origin in the mid-1980s. Feminist leaders rooted in the second wave like Gloria and Soltois, Bell Hooks, Sandoval, Moraga, Lottie, Kingston, and many other black feminists sought to negotiate a space within feminist thought for consideration of race-related subjectivities. Students, third wave feminism also contains internal debates between different feminists such as the psychologist Kligan, who believes that there are important differences between the sexes, and those who believe that there are no inherent differences between the sexes and contends that gender roles are due to social conditioning. Students, post-feminism describes a range of viewpoints reacting to feminism while not being anti-feminist. Post-feminists believe that women have achieved second wave goals while being critical of third wave feminists' goal. The term was first used in the 1980s to describe a backlash against second wave feminism. It is now a label for a wide range of theories that take critical approaches to previous feminist discourses and includes challenges to the second wave's ideas. Students, other post-feminists say that feminism is no longer relevant to today's society. Emilia Jones wrote that the post-feminist texts which emerged in the 1980s and 1990s portrayed second wave feminism as a monolithic entity and criticized it using generalizations. One of the earliest wave of the term was in Susan Proteins' 1982 article Voices of the Post-Feminist Generation, published in New York Times magazine. This article was based on a number of interviews with women who largely agreed with the goals of feminism but did not identify as feminists. Some contemporary feminists such as Katha Pollitt or Strawson consider feminism to hold simply that women are people. Views that separate the sexes rather than unite them are considered by these writers to be sexist. rather than feminist. In her book, Backlash, the Undeclared War Against American Women, Susan Forty argues that backlash against second-wave feminism in the 1980s has successfully redefined feminism through the terms. She argues that it constructed the women's liberation movement as the source of many of the problems alleged to be plaguing women in the late 1980s. She also argues that many of these problems are illusory, constructed by the media without reliable evidence. According to her, this type of backlash is a historical trend, recurring when it appears that women have made substantial gains in their efforts to obtain equal rights. Okay students, see you next class.